This is Investment Perspectives with Brad Kimes, daily live streaming interactive, featuring Mrs. Backup. Subscribe, hit the notification, smash the likes. Now, here's Backup Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Good morning and welcome back to Investment Perspectives, everybody. I wanted to put together a quick video where we talk about the second bankruptcy in the history of the United States of America and a debt jubilee that I believe will extend the length of the world. This isn't the first time I've covered this, but what's amazing is we're starting to see signs of this from the entities that would participate and elect to partake in such an event. What you have in front of you is a post from Gold Telegraph, and shout out to Gold Telegraph, has been on fire here lately. Around $1 trillion of debt owed by the developing countries would be canceled under a global deal proposed by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. Hello, debt jubilee. Now, this isn't to put a flag on the moon, but we covered this April 19th, XRP debt jubilee and the bankruptcy king. We also covered back in March, bankruptcy of a country looks like. You know, I'm only showing this because we've talked about it and I feel like we have our thumb on it. It's not to put a flag on the moon, but rather to just illustrate that I believe the way we are reading the tea leaves is correct. Moving into this now, Kristalina Georgieva, the new IMF managing director, also debt cancellation may be necessary. Now, understanding that the UN and the IMF would be dealing with debt cancellation with the smaller countries of the world. But yet, this sets the tone, doesn't it? This is the actual article, and you can find all this on my Twitter, guys. This is the actual article that talks about the UN agency calls for $1 trillion developing world debt write-off. Again, this would be for your lower countries, smaller countries that the IMF deals with quite frequently. But this is setting the tone, and now we talk about the fact that the Federal Reserve, which weeks ago had given special powers and special rights to BlackRock. BlackRock, Glenn Hutchins, Larry Fink, and others there tied heavily as they invest early in Ripple. American banks can simply bail themselves out thanks to the Fed's $27 trillion BlackRock deal. Now, we'll just go through some of this. I'm not going to read the entire article because it's very, very political, and some points are good and some points are a little one-sided. But nevertheless, mainstream media has been awfully quiet about all the fraud and manipulation stemming from global bureaucracies. Newly enacted pandemic reaction policies in the U.S. Amid all the commotion and fear, the Federal Reserve granted special powers to the giant private equity firm BlackRock. The arrangement has been criticized a great deal because BlackRock is now allowed to buy corporate bonds and commercial mortgages with no oversight and continuously. Moreover, BlackRock can bail itself out and give funds to the many fossil fuel suppliers who are desperately seeking stimulus from the government. Unfortunately, politicians and central bankers worldwide have used the pandemic outbreak as an excuse to print unlimited money for private financial institutions and shut down global economies. In the United States, economists have stressed that the response to the pandemic outbreak was the worst decision in 100 years. We know with as much certainty as one can know such things that lockdowns are very costly and confer no clear benefits. Wow. Author Robert Wright said, American Institute of Economic Research, we also know that places that did not lock down and restrict basic civil liberties suffered no worse fates than those that did. That's quite interesting. That tells me that, certainly the pandemic is very real, but the contagion rate is the contagion rate, it sounds like to me. Meanwhile, after disturbing a measly distributing a measly $1,200 check to American citizens, the CARES Act Relief Act, has given politicians a pay raise, and trillions were offloaded to Wall Street and special interest groups in the U.S. Further, the Federal Reserve has made it more difficult to place blame on the central bank, as the institution has given special powers to the equity firm BlackRock. Now I'll read this and then we'll wrap to the next piece. BlackRock has been appointed by the Fed to buy corporate bonds and commercial mortgages. The firm has more power than any other financial institution in the United States, as BlackRock will oversee $27 trillion and the Fed's new $4.5 billion Wall Street slush fund. Despite the massive power BlackRock has obtained, financial incumbents have been silent about the appointment. With $27 trillion under various forms of its management, BlackRock towers over the finance, insurance, and real estate sectors. Details the financial columnist Joyce Nelson. This much consolidated financial power may be unprecedented, but it's not really unprecedented. BlackRock was also appointed to have special powers in 2008 when we had the collapse then. Now, it may not be to the degree that it is today, but this is not the first time BlackRock has sat in this seat. But with BlackRock involved in virtually every major corporation across the planet, including the media, even BlackRock's competitors, if that word even applies, are quiet about BlackRock's appointment, she added. Now, that's a true statement. Now, this comes into the too big to fail, and it starts talking about systemically important to the financial system, SIFMUs, right? Financial market utilities. Well, BlackRock is absolutely a financial market utility. Now, it does discuss here, and here's where it starts to take on a different light here, where it talks about to keep the monetary Ponzi scheme going strong. For instance, BlackRock can bail itself out and their friends at any time they want. And most of BlackRock's buddies include fossil fuel suppliers, these fuel producers feeling the brunt of the economic slowdown. And they talk about the drop in the barrel of oil. And then there was one other point. It's systemically important, being able to do whatever the institution pleases. Okay. So basically, furthermore, BlackRock is the largest purveyor of ETF, exchange-traded funds. Okay, and the article in the next paragraph goes in to talk about how they can buy back, basically. Now, buybacks mean they can buy back their own stock, their own ETFs, right? And in doing so, they can really make themselves worth more by doing that. But the reality is, you have to have a little bit more perspective than that. Although there's a lot right about what's written here, you do have to understand that in this time that buybacks are absolutely necessary, because who's really holding those ETFs? People who've put their life savings in this money. And to some degree, as much as I don't want to take up for the elite, to some degree, there is an obligation to keep the ETFs alive, right? And not let them completely hit the floor. However, this is not capitalism, what you're witnessing, right? Capitalism has very two important components. Shout out to Milton Friedman, God rest his soul. Profit and loss, right? And when things start becoming systemically important, too big to fail, you're no longer dealing with profit and loss. You're dealing with socialism that's really been turned over to a private company to bail out the special interest. And that's exactly what's happening here. So, all right. So now, this is all in an effort for the central bank, the Federal Reserve, to get BlackRock to be the one who gets them out of a hole. And the problem is if you look at what happened to oil and the huge downward spike in oil, they couldn't print enough money from the Fed and the Treasury and allow enough money to be printed and expanding the balance sheet to keep up with the drop in oil price. Because if they could have elevated the price of oil, but they couldn't get it done. And they proved that problem is much bigger than anybody actually wants to really realize. And I don't think it's done by a long shot. In fact, to that point, Mitch McConnell thinks bankruptcy, not more federal money, might be the best for state and local governments. Well, gee whiz, has he been watching the show? This is unavoidable. That's the point. And you can't keep throwing good money after bad. The real point here is this. If you want to stop the bleeding, you have to absolve the debt. Bankruptcy is unavoidable. Just so happens we happen to have the bankruptcy king as the president of the United States of America right now. I have made no mistake about it, and it is not a endorsement or any other form of endorsement to anything. I'm just making an observation. That's all it is. This is a president who is very familiar with massive, massive billion-dollar bankruptcies in his career and professional life. I believe that we are witnessing the second bankruptcy of the United States of America. First one being back in the Great Depression. It would appear to me that BlackRock, because they have their hands in so many different sectors, it is their job to collect and gather pristine collateral that can be brought together to at some point restart and reignite this economy from all sectors and all parts of the world. But what I do believe is there's a second part to this equation, and it's bankruptcy. It's a debt jubilee. And in order to do that, you have to figure out in formulation where all this tally goes. Because you could literally, at this point, endlessly print money, and you will not solve this situation. The stimulus check that went out didn't stimulate anything. People are treading water and buying groceries, paying the bare minimum of their bills when they get that $1,200. By the way, while politicians wrote themselves a raise in, how much of that was covered by the corporate news? Oh, that's right, it wasn't. So maybe, just maybe, we're going to actually see this document that we've covered here that was provided by Spencer H. The Orderly Liquidation Authority and Bankruptcy Reform, put together in 2017 and released to the president in 2018. Within this document, it talks about how they can do a judge court-approved bankruptcy in 48 hours. They would file on a Friday and be back to work by a Monday. But this is only for the ones that are approved by the judge in the court system to be determined that they're too big to fail. Just something to think about here, guys. You know, this hole is pretty big, and sometimes a hole is just one too big you can't fill. That's going to do it for me. I'm going to ask you to hit the like and subscribe if you like this content. Please share it with others, and let's get a lot of people in here today for that 12 o'clock show in the live stream. Let's have a great discussion. I love hearing your insights and perspectives. I can't wait to see you there. Take care and see you soon.